Tonight, as the gossamer veil between worlds unravels and silence itself seems to breathe beyond the borders of being, I invite you to step into a realm where legend and terror merge with every heartbeat pounding in your temples. Across the centuries, elders' voices braided with the crackle of campfire, shadows dancing on cave walls, carrying tales that neither time nor oblivion could shackle. In every corner of the earth, the whispers repeat, more exists than we can see, and what waits beyond the edge of light needs only one misstep to emerge. Kindle the fragile flame of courage and let its tremor guide you through the labyrinth of shades, where three mythical creatures forge destinies of fear, mystery, and seduction. First, heed the call of blood, the throb of a heart belonging to neither life nor death. Deep in the dark of forgotten castles, the vampire rises from the crypt, lips offering eternity and the curse of a hunger that never sleeps. Feel his icy breath and meet his crimson eyes, mirror of endless night. Yet do not linger. The cold stones of an ancient temple whisper the name of she who turns beauty to stone. Medusa, her serpent's hissing of shattered destinies, hides sorrow beneath emerald scales and venom. Heroes echo in broken myths, while her gaze still seeks enough souls to ransom her curse. And when you think the maze is behind you, a sweep of ashen wings cuts the horizon. From the mist of deserted paths, Mothman unfolds his spectral frame, herald of calamity and oracle of the unknown. His ruby eyes burn like fateful beacons, sketching the end before it dawns. Stay with me, traveler of the uncanny, and steel yourself to unveil the truth behind these shadows. The adventure begins now. Imagine a night submerged in silence, when even the wind seems to hold its breath, and the full moon stands vigil in the dark sky like a gleaming white eye. You see elongated shadows slipping among the trees and hear barely perceptible rustles, akin to the steps of an invisible cat. A peculiar tension floats in the air, as though the earth itself trembles beneath the burden of ancestral secrets. It is the moment when ancient tales awaken and when legends emerge from the forgotten pages of the past. With a faint shiver, you remember that there are creatures said to feed upon the vital essence of human beings, vampires, those refined hunters of the night. I invite you to let yourself be carried by thrills and curiosity on a cinematic voyage into the origins and mysteries of this timeless myth, for you will find a story woven from shadows, blood, and hope awaiting you. As we begin to unravel the thread of history, we envision the sounds of a grand orchestration, strings vibrating slowly, drums beating heavily, and a choir intoning a strange, dark theme. This is the atmosphere that has enveloped the popular imagination for centuries when it comes to vampires. With silent yet dramatic steps, we enter the realm of legend. There is something irresistibly captivating in the notion of a being that reigns over the night, possessing a hypnotic power and exuding a somber charm. Behind its mantle of dark refinement, the vampire conceals forbidden powers and an unquenchable thirst for blood, which turns it into a metaphor for both fear and desire. Yet how did these stories arise? And why have they endured for so many ages? Let us turn back to the wellsprings of the myth. From the ancient settlements of Eastern Europe, where beliefs in malevolent spirits and undead were commonplace, the concept of the vampire spread like a shadow across continents. From the days before electric light existed, when fires flickered dimly in isolated hearths, the dread of entities that feed on the life force of humans took root in popular culture. tales of reanimated beings that rise from their graves and haunt villages to satiate their thirst were passed along orally. In the Balkans especially, there were accounts of strigoi or moroi said to return and torment their kin. Even the smallest superstitions about restless graves or uncanny markings discovered on exhumed bodies were taken as proof of the vampire's existence. Yet these scattered narratives gained a cohesive form only when brought to light by printing and the written word. Every culture seems to have its own vampiric entities. In Central and Eastern Europe, we find the classic vampire and various strigoi. In ancient Greece, there was the lamia. In Slavic mythology, one might encounter the vrikolakas. While in Asia, such as in China, there is the jiangshi, a sort of hopping corpse endowed with malevolent powers. And in the Philippines, there is the aswang, a vampiric spirit in multiple guises. Although their names, appearances, and specifics vary, the central notion remains the same: a being suspended between life and death that nourishes itself on human vital energy. This universality suggests that the vampire metaphor strikes a sensitive chord in the human subconscious, symbolizing fear of the unknown, anxiety toward mortality, and at the same time, the desire to transcend life's boundaries. Over the centuries, the belief in vampires seeped into funerary rituals, influenced perspectives on death, and played a role in defining the sacred and the profane. During the Middle Ages, devastating epidemics and a lack of scientific understanding intensified the dread of the risen dead. In many villages, corpses were exhumed, and if they showed signs that seemed unnaturally fresh, it was believed the deceased must be a vampire. Various methods were employed to prevent its return. A stake was driven through the heart, the head and limbs were severed, or religious rites were performed to keep the unholy at bay. Although today we know that decomposition can have odd manifestations, including fluids that might look like fresh blood at the mouth, people of that era deemed such signs indisputable evidence of a vampire. Later on, the emergence of prominent written accounts, such as Austrian reports of vampire activity in the Balkans, as well as Bram Stoker's famous work, Dracula, cemented the vampire's image in Western consciousness as a sophisticated yet malevolent and seductive figure. Vampire mythology depicts it as a graceful predator of the night, endowed with dark powers and perpetually drawn to blood. Often in classic literature and folklore, vampires were portrayed as extremely pale individuals, with gleaming eyes and a noble aspect, or conversely, in some traditions, as repellent creatures whose faces were distorted by thirst and fury. In modern interpretations, the elegant side of the vampire has taken center stage, clad in refined attire, moving with inhuman grace, and able to subjugate victims by a mere gaze or through hypnotic abilities. This duality, sophistication and monstrosity, has elevated it as one of the most potent symbols of repressed desire and the hidden danger lurking behind an attractive facade. The vampire's magnetism arises chiefly from its supernatural essence. It is believed to possess physical strength and agility far exceeding those of ordinary humans. Additionally, tradition attributes to it the power to change into a bat, a wolf, or even mist, disappearing without a trace or penetrating well-guarded places. Some vampires can control night creatures like bats or wolves and can manipulate the human mind, instilling fascination or terror. Their might is inseparable from the very substance of blood, which grants them eternal youth, regenerative ability, and in certain tales even the power of flight. All these traits make them icons of perilous seduction, a power that comes with a merciless price, insatiable thirst and perpetual torment. Though vampires may seem invincible, both folklore and world literature have given voice to their frailties. Sunlight is, in most legends, the vampire's greatest enemy. A single beam can wound, burn, or even reduce it to ash. Then there is garlic, its strong scent and perceived purifying properties able to repel or weaken the creature. Holy symbols like crosses or holy water constitute formidable barriers, for the vampire is seen as a cursed being spurned by Christian sanctity. The most renowned and dramatic means of vanquishing it remains driving a stake through its heart, a ritual that signifies the triumph of life over unnatural death and puts an absolute end to the vampire's existence. This mix of overwhelming powers and unmistakable vulnerabilities intensifies its mystique and keeps collective fascination alive. The vampire is not merely a nightmare creature, but also a symbol charged with countless meanings. At its core, it represents the fear of dying paired with the longing for immortality, challenging the boundary between life and death. Psychologically, the vampire can be viewed as temptation that corrupts and devours the human side of us all, the lust for power, the fixation on youth, and the dangerous allure of the forbidden. Hence, it is no surprise that literature, theatre, and film have embraced this theme, producing, across time, spellbinding stories of dignified aristocrats reigning over dark castles, as well as emotionless beasts that stalk in the shadows. Each era and culture projects onto the vampire screen its own worries and hopes, making the creature a vehicle for the collective imagination. In a broader context, the vampire is akin to other nocturnal or undying beings. For instance, Romanian folklore includes strigoi, who occasionally rise from their graves, haunting relatives, affecting harvests, and leaving a mark on community life. In other places, tales speak of varkolachi, creatures that can cause eclipses or devour fragments of the moon. In some versions, they share traits with vampiric nature. Similarly, Celtic or Germanic traditions mention the living dead returning with supernatural powers, driven by vengeance or unfulfilled passions. This diversity of entities shows that the concept of returning from the dead and feeding on others' vitality is a common thread across world mythologies, while the vampire merely stands as the best-known archetype, shining in a gothic and seductive light. The relationship between vampires and humankind plays out on a razor's edge. On one hand, people have always feared the prospect of a nocturnal predator, yet on the other, they have been enchanted by its irresistible aura. In legends, the vampire roams through villages, spreading fear and death. However, in romantic tales, it becomes a tormented spirit, a soul doomed to loneliness and isolation, which, beneath an evil mask, hides a piercing longing for human warmth. This complexity has fueled thousands of stories and legends, and for the people of the Middle Ages, the belief in a vampire's reality shaped social customs. It was thought that a vampire could form an emotional bond with a victim, linking them through a blood ritual, while also holding the power to claim the victim's life at any moment. Amid this backdrop, fear and seduction meld in a mesmerizing dance of shadows. Faith in vampires was not only an act of imagination. In rural areas, people actually performed protective rituals, sprinkling garlic on doorsteps or adorning windows with religious emblems to keep such entities away. Over time, as the myth spread, artists, writers, and prominent figures found themselves enthralled by its dramatic potential. From vampire plays that took over European stages in the 18th and 19th centuries to the controversial Nosferatu of the silent film era and the countless cinematic adaptations that followed, the vampire has left its stamp on cultural creations. Furthermore, political figures have sometimes been labeled as vampires, either to demonize them or to highlight their greed for power and the way they drain the people's lifeblood. These parallels give the myth a timeless quality, proving its versatility across religious and socio-political frameworks. Picture living in a medieval village, lacking electricity and public lighting, where each night falls like a curtain of pitch. In such conditions, any eerie sound could be interpreted as the diabolic presence of a vampire. People kept candles lit all night long, gathered under one roof for collective safety, and recited prayers designed to shield them from forces of darkness. Some families drove iron crosses into the ground near their dwellings or traced symbols in ash by their thresholds. When a neighbor died suddenly, rumors that he would come back gained momentum, and that communal anxiety might lead to extreme measures, exhumations, religious incantations, and grim rituals meant to safeguard the living realm. Though such scenes may seem unimaginable today, they reveal the extraordinary hold this myth once had on the collective psyche. In certain stories, the vampire is not purely a villain, but rather a paradoxical guardian of specific communities or families, provided they enter a mutually beneficial agreement. Some versions suggest that by receiving blood in a ritualistic fashion, the vampire could ensure prosperity or protection against other malevolent forces. Naturally, these depictions are far less common and often intermingle with elements of magic or witchcraft. Regardless, the notion that a vampire can serve a beneficial role underscores its mythic complexity. Sometimes legends imply that a former hero or a gifted healer might fall from grace and turn into a vampire, yet still retain a desire to aid their people, forging a sort of truce between worlds. This blend of horror and hope has endowed the vampire with a rare versatility among myths. With the rise of modern science, researchers have attempted to rationalize vampirism through medical conditions such as porphyria or rabies, or through misconceptions about natural decay processes. Others have seen belief in vampires as a psychological response to the dread of disease and death. Certain psychiatrists have connected the notion of consuming vital energy to emotional vampirism, viewing it as a metaphor for manipulative personalities. From a folkloric angle, many specialists consider that the myth formed through the overlap of ancient beliefs in evil spirits and historical phenomena like epidemics and inexplicable deaths. Today, vampires remain a topic studied by ethnologists and anthropologists alike, as a way to understand how society deals with fear, mortality, and the unknown. Although the majority of scientists deem the vampire a mythical and literary figure, there are still groups fascinated by paranormal and cryptozoological phenomena who argue that real vampires could exist, either misunderstood or overlooked. Some maintain that there may be beings with genetic anomalies allowing them to process blood components differently. Others venture further, believing in a hidden race of nocturnal creatures, perhaps dwelling underground or in extremely isolated regions. These notions remain speculative and unsupported by solid evidence. Yet the intrigue of such a mystery and the possibility that some trace of real vampires might be out there have sparked expeditions, urban hunts, and amateur investigations, perpetuating interest in a legend that seems never to wither. As the world changes, so does the vampire. In modern times, we have witnessed its transformation into lavish cinematic trilogies, television series, video games, and themes for cosplay or specialized conventions. Each reinterpretation brings new components. Vampires can be genuinely tragic heroes in love with mortals, or they might have civic awareness, or perhaps they are torn between their bestial side and noble ideals. In other variations, they serve as metaphors for infectious disease or addiction, mirroring the predicaments of contemporary society. This ability of the myth to metamorphose shows that the vampire is a vibrant cultural organism, able to adapt to any era and sensibility while still retaining its fundamental core: lethal thirst and a fascination with what instills dread in us. Beyond fiction, there are individuals and groups devoted to paranormal inquiries who travel to places rumored to be haunted by vampires. Bran Castle, though more historically linked to Vlad Tepes, often associated with the inspiration for Dracula, remains a tourist magnet for those seeking to approach the true home of vampires. Amateur researchers frequently hold overnight camps equipped with infrared cameras, audio recorders, and devices intended to detect spirit energy. Typically, they do not uncover conclusive phenomena, yet the excitement, speculation, and hope that something lies out there in the darkness only intensify the legend. Documentaries, media stories, interviews with alleged victims, or modern vampires who claim they need blood to feel revitalized. All of these nourish the myth's aura, reinforcing the notion that it has not died out but merely adapted to current times. Today, looking back on ages of fear and fascination, we see that the vampire has firmly taken root in global culture. From books and stage plays to Hollywood productions and streaming platforms, it remains an undeniable topic of interest. The vampire is linked to the idea of lethal seduction, an eroticization of death, and an unending debate about good and evil. Its influence is visible in Halloween costumes, specialized tourism, and even academic research, exploring the socio-cultural implications of the living dead. As a symbol, it signifies not only monsters, but also the contradictions of human nature. Our urge to break free of limitations, paired with the fear that such power might corrupt and destroy us. Hence, the vampire continues to captivate and inspire generation after generation. And so, we find ourselves at the end of this cinematic passage through the realm of vampires, a domain where shadows appear more alive than light, and where the thirst for blood merges with the thirst for knowledge. The vampire greets us at the boundary between life and death, between fascination and horror, between reality and imagination. Perhaps we will be left with unanswered questions. Do such creatures truly exist? Or are they mere reflections of our own fears and desires, enshrined in stories that never cease to intrigue us? Whatever the answer, the legacy of this myth cannot be denied. It is a summons from the night, an invitation to probe the limits of the human condition, to confront our terrors, and to allow ourselves to be swept away by the allure of an ancient enigma. And when the wind whistles among the trees and the moon slips behind the clouds, perhaps, for just an instant, we will feel our hearts pounding faster. Because in the deep of night, when shadows dance in silence, nothing seems impossible. Not even the presence of an elegant creature of darkness, poised to feast on our fears and passions. And thus, our documentary draws to a close, leaving you with the unbroken echo of nocturnal shivers, and the invitation to always look beyond appearances, there where a centuries-old myth still sharpens its fangs beneath the moon's tremulous glow. Imagine a crescendo of drums and strings swelling above the sun-scorched cliffs of the island of Seriphos, while the camera soars like an Olympian hawk over an abandoned temple. The columns still bear the scars of the salty wind, and between them mosaics still throb with faces of gods long forgotten. Suddenly a gust tears away the millennial dust, unveiling a votive plaque, the outline of a woman's face, great eyes, lips parted in a silent cry, and hair a knot of green serpents. A deep voice rolls across the image like an echo from primordial time. There are legends that neither darkness nor time can kill. The tale of Medusa is one of them. The first written mention of Medusa appears in Hesiod's Theogony of the 7th century before Christ. The poet names 3 Gorgon sisters, Stheno, Euryale, and Medusa, daughters of the sea gods Phorcys and Ceto. Only Medusa was mortal, a detail that would seal her fate. To the Hellenes, her land lay at the margins of the known world, whether on Sarpedon Island or the western shores of the land of the Hesperides, where sunset blurred into nothingness. The place was described as a peninsula of black rocks, damp caverns, and greenish waters lit only by moonlight. Any misstep could attract the Gorgon's gaze, and sailors shuddered at the thought that the sea foam hid the hiss of her snakes. The Greeks soon turned Medusa's face into an apotropaion, a talisman meant to drive evil away. Ceramic vases, hoplite shields, temple lintels, even coins bore her visage. Joined brows, protruding tongue, eyes wide open. An image poised between fascination and horror. For Sicilian colonists, the road west was lined with altars to the Gorgon, convinced that Medusa calmed storms and scattered pirates. Thus her paradoxical role was born, menace and protector at once. The canon links Medusa to the hero Perseus, son of Zeus. King Polydectes, wishing to remove him, demands the Gorgon's head as a bridal gift. Perseus receives winged sandals from Hermes, a cap of invisibility from Hades, a serrated sword from Hephaestus, and a mirror-bright shield from Athena. The Gorgon's cave, described by Pseudo-Apollodorus, trembles in shadow. A smell of burning and salt clings to your skin. Blood thrums while serpents rustle like autumn leaves. Perseus advances without looking. The shield reflects Medusa's shape and the blade falls. From the spilled blood spring Pegasus and the warrior Chrysaor, giving the legend cosmic weight. Ovid tells a tragic variant. Medusa, once a virgin priestess, was violated by Poseidon in Athena's temple. The goddess, offended, punishes not the aggressor but the victim. Her hair becomes snakes, her beauty turns monstrous. Modern critics read here a commentary on blaming the victim. In Phrygia, carved reliefs show the guardian demon Medusa. In Celtic lore, the crone Cailleach turns earth to stone at winter's onset. Across cultures, the motif returns, the lethal meeting of curiosity and taboo. Archaic artists sketch Medusa as a beast, broad brow, fangs, a fixed and terrifying stare. Classical sculptures such as the Medusa Rondinini humanize her, catching the mute tear of a victim. The power, petrification, remains constant. Byzantine tradition claims Athena gathered the Gorgon's blood. From one urn flowed a poison that kills, from another an elixir that heals. Thus Medusa stands guard at the threshold between life and death. Gaston Bachelard sees her gaze as the ultimate prohibition. To know everything slays innocence. In Jungian archetypes, she is the shadow. Reject her, and you turn to stone within your own darkness, but look at her through the mirror of consciousness, and she becomes a creative source. From the pediment of the Temple of Artemis in Corfu, 540 before Christ, to the mosaics of Fishbourne Palace in Britain, Medusa's face repeats obsessively. In the Renaissance, Benvenuto Cellini casts in bronze Perseus with the head of Medusa, a masterpiece of Baroque pathos. In 1597, Caravaggio paints Medusa's head on a shield, a moment suspended between horror and release. Artemisia Gentileschi goes further, painting herself as the Gorgon and challenging gender stereotypes. In the 20th century, Medusa floods comics and video games. Marvel reimagines her with prehensile hair, and the God of War series turns petrification into gameplay. The House of Versace adopts the Gorgonean as its emblem, an attraction with no escape, as Donatella Versace confesses. The monster becomes fashion, fear becomes luxury. Ancient maps place the Gorgon's territory where geographers wrote Hic sunt dracones. Her homeland is a labyrinth of basalt grottos, shuddering with every wave. The air smells of algae and burnt salt. Sunlight, filtered through fissures, projects rainbows on wet walls, making stone serpents seem alive. Seal colonies along the shores emit cries so human at night that sailors swear they hear hissing snakes. Modern biologists suggest these amplified howls may have fed the myth. The myth does not end with decapitation. Pindar tells that Athena fixed the Gorgonean on her aegis, turning it into a battlefield weapon. Hellenistic authors imagine a spectral dialogue. Andromeda hears Medusa's voice by night, imprisoned in Delphi's marble temple. The result? Prayers for the Gorgon's pardon and a local cult devoted to her rehabilitation, the dawn of a myth of compassion. Pliny the Elder wrote that Medusa's scales resembled malachite ocelli. Arab alchemists harvested Gorgon dust from pyrites, striking spectacular sparks that strengthened belief in petrifying magic. Libyan legends hold that soil spattered with her blood birthed carnivorous plants called dracaena, still feared by Tuareg tribes. The symbolism deepens. Life and death share a single root. The 21st century brought a pop electronic Medusa. Florence Plus the Machine released Queen of Peace, its video filmed on Sky with dancers wearing luminous snake circlets, an archaic-inspired rave. In 2023, Broadway staged the musical Stone Heart. In the aria Mirror of Ruin, a mezzo-soprano embodies Medusa before a giant screen that multiplies the audience, suggesting a fatal gaze turning spectators into emotional statues. On the 14th of June 1928, divers off Antikythera recovered a bronze bust of a Gorgon. After the dive, 2 crew members suffered hallucinations and transient paralysis. Modern analysis found box jellyfish toxins in the area, explaining the symptoms. In 1967, speleologist Dimitris Manolakis explored an underwater cave at Cape Tainaron. 30,000-year-old calcite formations mimicked a crown of snakes, and his luminous footage birthed rumors that the stones breathe. In 1975, near Butrint, archaeologists found a relief of a triple Gorgonean. Locals claimed cattle collapsed when evening shadows fell across the site. Tests showed high arsenic concentrations, residue of ancient mineralization, proof that science and legend can coexist. Geologist Anselm Kruger proposes the petrifying gases theory. Many gorgonic sites lie in travertine zones where carbon dioxide pools in caves, causing catatonia on inhalation, a phenomenon recast as myth. Psychologist Mirela Stanculescu explains the Medusa effect through the fight-freeze-flight reflex. A predator's stare can trigger motor freeze, and storytelling translates biology into the fabulous. Politically, Paul Cartledge sees the Gorgon as institutionalized fear. Look power in the eye and you turn to stone. Use the mirror of law and you survive. In 2019, astrophysicist Irina Tanazi linked the Perseid meteor shower to the sparks of Medusa's blood turning into red coral in the Mediterranean, reminding us how easily sky and legend intermingle. FBI files from the 1950s investigated occult cults inspired by Medusa, while contemporary fantasy novels recast Gorgons as anti-heroines. In fashion, Versace's 2024 clips use augmented reality. Serpent hair writhes on store screens, inviting passers-by to face the gaze. On social media, the hashtag #GorgonGaze amasses millions of views, its message one of self-acceptance. Look at your imperfections and turn them into strength. Current digital maps reveal high carbon dioxide emissions, precisely where Greek mythographers placed the Gorgon caves. Biologists note that certain Aegean vipers have green-gold eyes reflecting nightlight like emeralds, a likely seed for the mortal gaze tale. Thus, legend functions as an ancestral code warning of real environmental dangers. Irina Tanazi suggests the spectacular annual Perseid meteors inspired the belief that Medusa's blood sealed the sky's fire within coral. Though speculative, it shows how humanity unites cosmos and myth, turning astral phenomena into metaphors of hope and dread. Writer Hélène Cixous concludes, Medusa laughs. The Gorgon's laughter no longer petrifies, it liberates. On feminist banners, Medusa has become a symbol of resistance against those who condemn. Under the reddish light of the final sunset, the camera returns to the temple ruins. Wind gnaws at the pillars, and waves pound the shore as if in an ancient age. The narrator whispers, Medusa did not perish beneath Perseus's blade. She lives in our mirrors, in our art, in the fear and courage that shape us. When you see your own reflection shining in the darkness, remember, the legend does not die. It waits to be seen. Perhaps not directly, but through the shield of imagination. Do not fear the shadows. Tame them. In the place where fantasy collides with reality, there always Medusa will weave her story. Welcome to this epic journey into the heart of one of the most mysterious phenomena in American folklore, the legend of Mothman, ominously referred to as the Dark Prophet of Misfortunes. Imagine a somber setting, swept by winds rustling through bare trees, illuminated only by a pale moon and a sky burdened with clouds. In this landscape, a silhouette with massive wings and glowing red eyes silently rises, ready to vanish as swiftly as it appeared. The distant sound of an orchestra, as if it were a Gothic choir, resonates in the background, heightening the tension and promising you an encounter with a phenomenon that is both fascinating and chilling. I invite you to let yourselves be carried by the power of these stories and to step with emotion into a realm where myth and reality merge, and the boundary between the two grows unclear. This documentary addresses all who are curious, passionate about the paranormal, and lovers of folklore. Our aim is to explore together the cultural roots, the first sightings, the accounts that fueled the reputation of this hybrid monster, half human, half moth, and how it managed to become both feared and revered. We will analyze eyewitness testimonies, scientific interpretations, and the esoteric alternatives presented over the years. Through a cinematic, imagery-rich narrative, we will open the gates to a world full of secrets. All of this, with the hope that, in the end, you will feel as though you have witnessed a clandestine history, revealed only rarely, and only to those who dare to look beyond appearances. Prepare, therefore, for a hypnotic journey. We will explore in turn the origins and cultural context of the legend. We will traverse the meticulous descriptions of the unnatural characteristics and abilities attributed to Mothman. We will discover the ways in which it interacts with humans and how it became a symbol of dark omens. Finally, we will discuss the theories behind its existence or disappearance, concluding with a grand finale designed to make you reflect on the possibility that this messenger of darkness may still lurk in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to show itself once more. In order to understand the story of Mothman, we must first return to the origins of this legend, which intersects with modern folklore and a certain type of urban myth that emerged in the United States of America in the 1960 decade. Although myths about hybrid creatures, half human, half animal, have existed for centuries in various cultures, Mothman only began to be widely known after multiple sightings were reported, especially in the Point Pleasant area of the state of West Virginia. This region, with its dense forests, waterways, and an atmosphere already laden with local legends about spirits and ghosts, provided the ideal environment for the birth and flourishing of a new myth. Many paranormal researchers believe that the events of 1966 and 1967, the years with the largest number of incidents, were the starting point for Mothman's entrance into public consciousness. However, if we look carefully at the archives, we find isolated reports even before that period, some dating back to the first half of the 20th century, although they were not as detailed. Moreover, certain Amerindian tribes had in their folklore stories about giant birds with supernatural powers and eyes that shine at night, which could foretell natural disasters. Even if they were not directly identified with Mothman, these ancestral legends can be considered a cultural forerunner. On a universal level, the phenomenon of creatures regarded as heralds of misfortune is not unique to America. In various parts of the world, there are stories about beings that appear before catastrophes, whether we speak of ghosts, wrathful deities, or hybrids endowed with supernatural powers. The fact that Mothman emerged strongly in modern American culture at a time when the mass media began to pay more attention to inexplicable events greatly contributed to its notoriety and persistence. Like any myth that takes root, the one about Mothman also has a profound cultural background. West Virginia, in the middle of the 20th century, was facing multiple economic and social changes. Roads were being modernized, mines were being closed or automated, and the rural population was beginning to migrate to large cities. In this context, the appearance of an unnatural creature with red eyes and enormous wings became, for some, a symbol of the collective fear of rapid transformations. Furthermore, the region was steeped in superstition, and local communities often explained strange events, sudden animal deaths, the inexplicable disappearance of certain people, or tragic accidents as being caused by supernatural entities. In such an atmosphere, rumors spread quickly and most often were amplified as they passed from mouth to mouth. Mothman was precisely the kind of character that could spark the imagination. Not only frightening, but also endowed with a dark forewarning aura. It was said that wherever it appeared, a disaster would soon follow. Culturally speaking, the fear of the unknown has always been a powerful force, and rural communities in America, especially in forested areas, developed an entire tradition of nocturnal creatures. Thus, Mothman integrated smoothly, albeit terrifyingly, into a mythological ecosystem that included other strange beings: Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Chupacabra, Thunderbird creatures, native spirits, and many more. What made it different, however, was its humanoid appearance, which inspired a special kind of dread, as well as the fact that, unlike other monsters seeking victims, it seemed more like a messenger, a harbinger of catastrophes than a direct aggressor. Once the cultural context was set, we can look at the first concrete reports about Mothman that took root in the public consciousness. In November 1966, a group of 5 men digging a grave in a cemetery near the town of Clendenin, West Virginia, reported seeing something like a winged humanoid being flying over their heads. Only a few days later, 2 young couples claimed they encountered a bizarre creature with glowing eyes in an isolated area near the former TNT factory close to Point Pleasant. They described it as a sort of man with large wings flying by their car at a remarkable speed. This incident made waves in the local press. Newspapers began publishing articles about the bird monster or Mothman, a name that was quickly established. Around the same time, dozens of similar reports surfaced, with people claiming they had seen the creature near lakes or discovered claw marks or strange feathers on their rooftops. Panic spread rapidly against the backdrop of a population already inclined to believe in supernatural phenomena. Some locals began to set up their own defenses: night patrols, powerful lights in their yards, guard dogs. This wave of testimonies and press articles strongly resembled a kind of mass hysteria. Although the most skeptical tried to explain the sightings as a mistake involving a large owl or other nocturnal birds, the extent and consistency of many reports raised questions. Why would so many people describe the same traits, those same red eyes, the same impressive wingspan, the same apparent chasing of cars on deserted roads? Could it have been just a classic case of contaminated stories, or was there something tangible behind these events? Now that we have seen the first historical milestones, let us focus on what makes Mothman so unique in the bestiary of modern fantastic creatures. Although descriptions vary slightly, there are key elements that repeat themselves. In most accounts, the creature is shaped like a person around 1.80 to 2 meters tall, with a wingspan that can reach or exceed 3 meters. Its defining trait is its unusually large, bright red eyes, which, according to some witnesses, can glow or emit their own light in the dark. Its body is described as covered in some sort of dark fur or feathers, and its behavior oscillates between timid and aggressive. Some stories mention that Mothman can emit strange sounds, a sharp, somewhat metallic screech that echoes through the silence of the night and instills a visceral fear in those who hear it. There are also witnesses who swear that when they looked at the creature, they felt a wave of dizziness or confusion, as if Mothman possessed telepathic or hypnotic abilities. On the other hand, direct attacks are rarely reported. Most incidents suggest that the being appears suddenly, observes intensely or follows with curiosity, then withdraws just as quickly. This ambiguity created the impression that Mothman might be more of a dark prophet, a herald of looming disasters rather than a predator, hence its nickname, Prophet of Misfortunes. In other regions' folklore, creatures that announce catastrophes are often associated with vengeful deities or spirits, but in the case of Mothman, there is no invocation of a classic religious cult. It is rather a modern symbol of our collective anxieties, of the feeling that an unknown power hovers over society, ready to strike when we least expect it. Beyond its apparent appearance and behavior, the mythology surrounding Mothman has been enriched by numerous urban legends and conspiracy theories. Some claim that this entity is the result of a failed military experiment, given its proximity to a former TNT factory and supposed secret governmental facilities. This scenario is reminiscent of the laboratory monsters found in classic science fiction films which escape their creators' control and hide in isolated areas. Others believe that Mothman is an ancient spirit, perhaps even the pillar of a cult dedicated to obscure deities. In a few Amerindian folklore traditions, giant birds with black feathers symbolized warlike power or impending death. It is possible that an ancestral spirit assumed the form of a humanoid avian creature to warn humans about the fragile balance between our world and the forces of nature. Another theory proposes that Mothman is an extraterrestrial entity, a traveler from another dimension, manifesting in moments of crisis to observe humanity's reactions or to attempt delivering an important message. Regardless of interpretation, what both intrigues and captivates is the aura of mystery and the powerful way in which the subject has embedded itself in popular culture. References to Mothman appear in books, documentaries, films, and even video games. It has become a cult figure, a brand of the unexplained, positioned somewhere on the boundary between a legendary creature and a collective psychological phenomenon. Above all, it remains a messenger for many who swear they have seen it, or who strongly believe that its appearances always precede a major disaster. The most famous and shocking story linking Mothman to a real tragedy is the collapse of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on 15 December 1967. The bridge, which spanned the Ohio River and connected West Virginia to the state of Ohio, collapsed during rush hour, causing the deaths of 46 people. Witnesses reported that before this unfortunate event, numerous sightings of Mothman had been noted in the area. This led to the idea that the creature might have tried to warn the local community, or on the contrary, that its presence was an ill omen culminating in this major tragedy. People began piecing together details, reports of the creature being seen near the bridge, strange noises at night, and even unclear photographic evidence. After the bridge collapse, the media went into a frenzy and national press outlets seized on the story. Articles were written, interviews and talk shows about Mothman appeared. The shocking truth of the tragedy, combined with the mystical air surrounding the legend, further anchored in the collective mind the idea that wherever this creature appears, something catastrophic is about to happen. Of course, official reports indicate that the Silver Bridge collapse was caused by a design flaw and wear, nothing mystical or paranormal. Nevertheless, in popular culture, the association between Mothman and this event remains strongly ingrained. Many people believe that the being acted as a warning, a disregarded prophet, while others, more skeptical, think it was all just a coincidence magnified by sensationalist media. Either way, this story helped solidify Mothman's reputation as the prophet of misfortunes. Beyond its connection to the Silver Bridge, There are other accounts that associate Mothman's appearances with potential disasters. Certain conspiracy theories even link its presence to other dramatic events on a global or local scale. For instance, rumors circulated that it was seen around Chernobyl a few days before the 1986 nuclear accident, or more recently near the Twin Towers in New York before the 11 September 2001 attacks. Most of these stories, however, lack solid evidence and are difficult to verify. Still, the idea that Mothman might have manifested in different parts of the world, always as a harbinger of catastrophe, has taken root in paranormal theory circles. Thus, it is a phenomenon that transcends the boundaries of a local legend, turning into a global symbol of something bad that is about to happen. This notion brings it closer to the black dog concept from British folklore, a spectral canine that, legend says, appears on travelers' paths to foretell death or misfortune. But unlike the black dog, Mothman invites even more speculation due to its humanoid nature and implications of experiments or extraterrestrial life. Furthermore, it is observed that these international reports started appearing after the story had become famous in the United States, leading some to suspect the power of online and mass media contagion. Once the image of a red-eyed, huge winged creature announcing disasters took hold, any unusual nocturnal bird flight or any blurry recording could be attributed to Mothman. Despite the controversies, the memory and fear remain, driven by our collective need to find signs and symbols in tragic events. What makes people so certain that Mothman is a harbinger rather than a mere hostile creature? In traditional cultures, there is a psychological phenomenon known as the messenger's paradox. The entity or person bringing ill tidings is often associated with causing the misfortune itself. From this perspective, if Mothman appears and a devastating event follows shortly after, it is easy for the human mind to establish a causal link, even if in reality it is purely coincidental. On the other hand, some individuals see the creature's appearance as a sort of divine or cosmic sign, as if the universe is trying to send us a message through an entity beyond our rational understanding. This attitude falls under a long history of beliefs and superstitions regarding premonitions, oracles, and celestial divine signs. For some, Mothman is not a demon, but rather an angel of warning, a tragic being destined to appear only when humanity is about to collide with calamity. Moreover, accounts of confusion or hypnosis suggest a possible ability to influence people's emotions. Some witnesses state that, upon seeing the being, they experienced an irrational fear, but also a kind of brief understanding or enlightenment, as if they were exposed to a higher reality. Thus, Mothman takes on almost mystical dimensions, acting as a medium between our world and unknown planes. In the absence of a scientific explanation, such interpretations become even more alluring and are easily passed on from one story to another. Let us imagine for a moment what life would have been like in a small West Virginia town in the 1960 decade, when reports of Mothman were on everyone's lips. Dark roads, surrounded by dense forests, minimal street lighting, and large distances between houses created a setting conducive to spreading fear. People gathered in the evenings at the local bar or in their yards to discuss the mysterious creature. Rumors grew. Someone heard from a neighbor about finding strange footprints in the mud. Someone else saw a huge figure gliding over a barn, while another was convinced a young animal had vanished overnight from their yard. In such circumstances, every sound in the darkness seemed meaningful, and fear became almost palpable. Skeptics were often dismissed or viewed with suspicion, Didn't you see anything? Do you truly refuse to admit there is something out there in the dark? Meanwhile, the authorities tried to maintain calm, though not even the local police officers were entirely reassured. Some recalled that the town had experienced paranormal visits in the past, and others were simply overwhelmed by the sheer number of reports seemingly pointing to the same type of creature. In such communities, faith played an essential role. Churches filled with prayers. Some religious leaders saw Mothman as a sign of the apocalypse, while others tried to reassure parishioners through sermons about the power of divinity to protect people from evil. And yet, no matter how comforting the priest's words, the fact remained that dozens of witnesses claimed to have encountered an unexplainable being, causing many to pass their nights with heightened tension and to pray that they would not be the next victim of a possible dark omen. Legend or reality, Mothman has had a considerable impact on popular culture. From its earliest mentions in the local press to the publication of John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies in 1975, the subject has exponentially grown in the public's attention. Keel's book emphasized the connection between Mothman sightings and a multitude of strange phenomena, including reports of UFOs, encounters with men in black, and other manifestations that are hard to classify. Later on, Hollywood's screen adaptation of the book, starring Richard Gere in the main role, brought the story into a dramatic register, leaving behind the mixture of fear and fascination typical of the 1960 decade and presenting Mothman to a global audience. In the artistic sphere, Mothman has inspired painters, illustrators, and comic book creators. In many depictions, the focus is on those hypnotic red eyes and on the wide, dark wings that seem to swallow the light. Musicians have turned it into the subject of songs and concept albums, while local festivals, like the annual Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, attract tourists and curious onlookers looking to feel the vibe of this myth firsthand. Even in academia, certain branches of social psychology and cultural anthropology analyze the case of Mothman as a phenomenon of collective hysteria, a rapid construction of a modern myth. In recent years, digital mass media has rediscovered the story and amplified it through videos, podcasts, and forum discussions, further boosting its notoriety. Today, Mothman remains an iconic figure in the pantheon of inexplicable creatures alongside Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, and it continues to tempt the collective imagination. If we wonder why there is no clear evidence, detailed photographs, biological samples, or official capture to definitively convince the scientific community, the answer can be found in multiple theories competing to explain the nature of Mothman. Skeptics believe that every report can be attributed to misidentifying large birds, such as the polar owl, which in certain lighting can display red eyes reflecting light, or cranes, and that subsequent local hysteria turned these simple confusions into a much more fantastical scenario. They also invoke mass hysteria to account for the flood of reports after the first newspaper articles. Then there is the paranormal hypothesis, which states that Mothman is an interdimensional entity that cannot be understood through conventional scientific lenses. According to this view, the creature crosses the barriers of our reality only for brief periods, leaving little physical evidence behind. It appears and disappears without a trace, as though governed by entirely different physical laws. A third set of theories suggests that Mothman could be a secret scientific experiment gone awry, or a biological mutant. Proponents of this idea point to the proximity of the old TNT factory in Point Pleasant, citing possible chemical leaks that might have caused mutations in certain bird or animal species. Although there is no definitive proof for any of these hypotheses, each presents a compelling narrative thread. Whether a case of collective confusion, a supernatural being, or an experiment gone out of control. Thus, the mystery remains intact, and Mothman retains its sinister charm and unwavering allure. Even today, interest in Mothman remains strong. Amateur expeditions, paranormal tours, and teams of independent researchers periodically gather in Point Pleasant and its surroundings, hoping to capture ultimate proof. Using infrared cameras, drones, and advanced audio equipment, they patrol forested areas, especially at night, in search of any sign attesting to the creature's real existence. The advent of the internet and social media has expedited the rapid sharing of any findings, be they blurry photos or late-night audio recordings. Yet so far, nobody has managed to produce incontrovertible evidence capable of convincing the scientific world. In contrast, skeptics have a wealth of arguments with which to dismantle every piece of evidence. Unclear images can be interpreted as nocturnal birds, light reflections, or even hoaxes staged by paranormal enthusiasts. This ongoing game of searching and debunking continues to stoke the fire of the mystery. Moreover, local residents of Point Pleasant have realized that the legend also brings economic benefits, turning the myth into a tourist brand. There are museums dedicated to the phenomenon, an annual festival with souvenirs and themed attractions, and tourists return year after year to stroll along the Ohio River, listen to stories around a campfire, and test their own theories about Mothman. Consequently, regardless of whether an undeniable truth will ever be found, the public's fascination with this enigma seems unlikely to fade, and the local community takes advantage of this ambiguity to maintain its status as the global capital of the Mothman. The fact that Mothman repeatedly appears in popular culture, conspiracy theories, and contemporary accounts shows that, on a collective level, we have a powerful attraction to stories that push us out of our comfort zone and remind us that the world can be far more complex than we like to believe. Some psychologists note that such legends allow us to project our fears and anxieties onto an external element, offering a concrete figure whose frightening presence can be both rejected and studied. Additionally, legends of this kind reveal the duality between skepticism and belief, between science and mysticism. Mothman reflects the conflict of modern man, who strives to understand everything around him, but who also feels the need to marvel at what appears incomprehensible. It is a creature that resonates with our sense of adventure and simultaneously with the subconscious fear that we are not alone and that there might be forces capable of influencing our destiny. The evolution of this legend is also a case study in how a modern myth is born and develops. In just a few decades, Mothman advanced from a local rumor to a flagship figure of the global paranormal culture. The internet played a massive role in perpetuating and reshaping the story through conspiracy websites, anonymous accounts on forums, and independent documentaries posted online. In a sense, the creature once again changed its identity, adapting to the demands of the new digital age, just as it adapted in the 1960 decade to the sensationalist appetite of the printed press. Here we are, at the end of this journey through the dark and fascinating world of Mothman, the prophet of misfortunes that has haunted the nights and the collective imagination for over half a century. We conclude with one last panoramic view. Behind us lies an expanse of forests and rivers, and the night sky seems more laden than ever. Perhaps in a moment of stillness, We might catch from the corner of our eye a winged silhouette gliding in the moon's dim light, ready to vanish before we can decide whether we truly saw something real or not. In essence, Mothman remains an archetype of the modern mystery, blending ancient fears linked to darkness and unknown creatures with the anxieties specific to a technologized world where the supernatural intersects with science and stories spread swiftly through global communication media. It is a character that, like most legends, reminds us how intensely we yearn to find meaning in tragic events and to place a face, demonic or redemptive, on the things we cannot understand or control. Perhaps the best way to comprehend Mothman is to see it as a bridge between human logic and cosmic mystery. Some consider it a warning, others see it as a threat. Some dismiss it as mere collective illusion, others are certain the entity resides in a parallel reality. Regardless of personal beliefs, its story remains deeply captivating and unsettling. And maybe that is precisely why it endures. The fact that it compels us to question the boundaries of our knowledge, the significance we assign to the signs around us, and our capacity to accept that certain secrets sometimes lie beyond any explanation. So, should you ever travel through the swampy, forested zones of rural America, keep an ear out for the whispers of the night and the shifting shadows in the darkness. Who knows? Perhaps Mothman will grant you its own silent warning, a reminder that between certainty and the unknown lies but one wing beat's distance.